Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thought Leadership Thursday. I'm Dr. Jane Bach, the Baker Inn influencer, and today I'm joined by KPM Analytics, specifically Mr. Arnaud Dubas. So, hi, Arnaud.
Hi, Jane. How are you? Very glad to be there.
Yes, we're so glad to have you.
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk a little bit about some instrumentation, but first, could you please tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do at KPM Analytics?
What I'm doing at KPM Analytics, that's a good question. There is always the title and what you do with the title. The title is business development, and in daily routine, what I am doing, I am a lot in contact with our partners around the world. I'm trying to visit as much as I can customers, users, trying to understand how do they use currently our devices and what are the missing parts in terms of quality control. So when I have this information, I come back to the technical teams and see how can we adapt our protocol. I think one of the best example or recent example is the adaptation of the alveograph to whole wheat flour analysis. That's the kind of thing. And sometimes it comes that we arrive with a new idea, a new product, and that's a little bit what happened for the solvent retention capacity. That's basically what I'm doing, and it's quite a bit of fun.
I was going to say, yeah, that's definitely a big job. So KPM Analytics, as you mentioned, you provide a variety of technical solutions, whether it be protocols, whether it be new instruments, but you offer a variety of technical solutions for bakers and millers alike to really understand the quality of their flour. Tell us a little bit about KPM Analytics and some of the solutions that you offer to millers and bakers out in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in fact, I have been working for Chopin Technology Company, which a French company based near Paris, for almost the last 30 years. And more recently, the company has been integrated in a bigger group called KPM Analytics. And this has really opened a lot of possibilities for us. And the reason is because we have partnership with other companies which are doing very complementary work. For instance, we have one of the company or two of the companies currently, which is iPro and Sightline. And these companies are dedicated to analyze the vision aspect of the product. Next, you're making a cookie or you're making whatever kind of baked product, and then you will have an image of a 3D image of the good. And for me, seeing that from Chopin, it has a lot of potential because it really helps the bakers to assess objectively the quality of their product. It's not like, okay, I like this one, so it's a good product. I don't like this one, it's a bad one. We don't really know why you like or you dislike. It's very personal. And even when we try to put that with frames to say, okay, this is a good one, this is a bad one, when we look about what the people are removing from the line and what should be removed, sometimes it doesn't match. And the beauty of these technologies is that you can really remove subjectivity from it, and the machine will also give us, for us it's also very important, give us very clear and sound data in terms of, I don't know, color, wideness, shape, whatever. We have numbers, and for us, when we try to improve the quality based on flour analysis, it's always better to have something very consistent and objective than having something that is okay, good one, bad one. It's really a huge improvement. We also have another part of the company which is doing NIR analyzer. We can measure, for instance, online moisture, which can be very interesting, particularly if you are doing dry product or moist product also. And we have another part also of the company which is dealing with other kind of analysis like water analysis. So all of that, first of all, it creates a unique offer that we can come to the bakeries and to the mills and have something very new to offer, a new way of seeing quality. And also important, we are learning a lot from the others, because the people installing vision on the process, they have a different perspective than ourselves working from the lab perspective. So yeah, it's also very exciting to see all this information together.
It's a little bit like a one-stop shop then, with opportunities for analytical instrumentation and inline solutions, really all there kind of to provide good, hard, objective data to make good business decisions. And with that, let's dive a little bit into our focus today and focus on one of your analytical offerings, specifically focused on the SRC test. So before we get into the instrumentation itself, let's just talk a little bit about the SRC test. What is it, and what does it tell us about flour quality?
Yes, great. Well, the SRC is really representative of part of my job I was mentioning earlier. This is something I discovered by going to the AACC, now Cereal and Grains meetings. And I have seen some scientists speaking about a test that they were calling solvent retention capacity, which had a lot of benefits, particularly for the cookie cracker industry. It was originally designed for this. So I started discussing with these people about this French test and what it is. And first of all, I learned the interest of the system that maybe we will be developing further in a moment. But I also understood that one of the drawbacks of this test is that it was very manual and sometimes inconsistent. So we had on one side a very interesting fundamental testing, but on the other side, difficulties to provide consistent value. So that's where we decided, okay, there is a match for a company like us, where we can help the industry taking benefit of the fundamentals of the test while giving them a way of having more repeatable and reproducible data. And that's exactly what we have been doing. And first of all, we have been, and that's interesting also to mention, we have been developing the system with the inventors of the method. And here we have to pay tribute to Ari Levine and Louis Slate, which were just two geniuses. In fact, what they have been discovering, particularly for this cookie cracker industry, they have been discovering that absorption, we speak a lot about water absorption, but when a flour absorbs water, in fact, there are three main components which are competing for water, which are protein, glutenin, which the second one is starch damage, and the third one is pentosan fibers. And the three of them, they are competing. And what they discover, and it's just amazing, they discover that depending on which one takes the water, the quality of the cookie will be different. So you have a direct relationship with the analysis you're doing and the final product. So that's what makes it a very attractive method for us.
As you mentioned, that SRC test and using those solvents to look at the absorption capacity of the different polymers in flour, that traditional SRC test is based on a lot of manual work on the part of the operator, especially manual shaking, centrifuge loading and unloading, manual draining. How does the SRC Chopin 2 build on and improve on the traditional SRC manual method?
You absolutely described perfectly the test. It's a lot of shaking, weighing, centrifuge. The time also is important. And I mean, if you think, in fact, the principle of the test is we are going to mix a certain quantity of flour, which is quite small, with 20 milliliters, it's about 5 grams of flour, and we're going to add 20 milliliters of solvent, which are different kind of solvents. We have lactic acid, we have sodium carbonate, and in fact we are using different because they react with the different three polymers, we call them, three big guys like glutamine and starch and benzoate. So when you put this powder with this liquid, you need to mix them, and the other way to mix them is to shake them. And we can imagine that you and me, if we are given two tubes and we say, okay, shake it, we're not going to shake it the same way. Maybe not with the same strength and maybe not with the same time. So that's the main thing that makes that our results would be inconsistent. Eventually, I can have my method and be very consistent with myself. So my repeatability will be very satisfactory, giving me the feeling the method is working well. But when I will start looking and comparing my results to yours, then we will have arguments, we will have discussion, but understand why your results are always higher or lower. And then there is the other thing that if it's very attached to the people, one day I can be a full shape and very healthy and okay, and I'm shaking like a god, and maybe the next day I will be tired because I went out with my friends and I'm tired, and then my shaking will be way smaller. So even my repeatability will be wrong. Then beside all that, we are using centrifuge, we are using other kind of systems which are not designed to be repeatable. So there is also attempt to use other kind of shakers, for instance, which is a good idea. But the thing is that the shakers, they are not calibrated and thought as analytical tool. So they do not have repeatability and reproducibility. So what we did with the SRC is take all the steps and say, okay, we are going to limit human intervention to the minimum. And in fact, today, the only thing that the operator has to do is to weigh the flour, to prepare the solvent and place them into a syringe on the top of the system, load the system. We can analyze 2 flour with the 4 solvents at a time. So when I say 4 solvent, it's sodium carbonate, lactic acid, sucrose, and water. So for 1 flour, it's 4 tubes. So we can use 2 flour, 8 tubes in total. Just load the syringes, close the door, and launch the test. And all the rest will be done automatically and in a very repeatable way, and reproducible way. So that's what we are doing. We are conceiving the machines for having the same results in France, in US, in China, in Argentina, wherever in the world. So that's really what brings. So in fact, we took all the good from the SRC test fundamentals, and we removed all the variation that made it interesting but not accurate test to do. So yeah.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head when you talk about operator variability. And one of the biggest issues that I've seen personally in SRC testing is big discrepancies that occur between, for example, supplier and customer labs due to the variability between different SRC operators. So what kind of reduction have you seen in SRC variability between 2 labs when using the SRC Chopin 2, the automated version?
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's always easy for a company to come and say, oh, you know, I have a wonderful tool and now it's doing everything better and more accurate. So it's easy to say, it's always more complicated to prove. So the first thing we've done to make sure that we were doing the thing correctly was, first of all, to have a starting point. And in fact, we had 2 starting points. The first one was AACC existing standard, which were describing the manual method. And in this method, we found the variation of the method because it was published. So that was one starting point. And then we also have been studying reports I will not give names, but there are reports that you can find on internet, and particularly from the US, but also from Asia, of people doing kind of collab study together, and some of them, they are using SRC method. And so we could measure between 4 or 5 people testing the same flower, what is the variation. So that was the starting point, and we said, okay, now we have a tool, let's try to see what is our performance. And how do we do that? We do that within the standardization process. So today the machine is standardized at AACC level, at ISO level, at ICC level, many level. And why it is, and how do we reach this point? We reach this point by doing a collab study, which consists in having a dozen of labs using the method. In our case, it was the SRC in Chopin, with a protocol, and we send them the same thing, a dozen of flower to analyze in duplicates. And then that gives us a full information about what is the performance of the test, not done by us, it's done by the people on the labs. And here we can measure repeatability and above all reproducibility. What we have seen, if we compared our new data with the old data, is that in terms of repeatability, we were gaining a little bit, but not that much. It was like 1.5 times better, something like that. And the reason why is that each lab, they are very serious one, and when they are doing the manual method, they do it on a very repeatable way. So little improvement, but maybe questionable about, okay, do we need to really invest in this machine? But when it comes to reproducibility, when we are comparing our results, that was a totally different answer. Our results were 2 times to 3 times better compared to previous method. When I said better, is we can imagine if you have a variation of plus minus 3 with the previous version, now we have a variation of plus minus 1. Why is that important? This is important because more and more the SRC is integrated into specifications for flower. So either you have very wide variation, which means that you can basically use whatever kind of flower, because we are not sure about the performance of the test. So you are not discriminating enough the flower. That's something I've seen in Malaysia some years, people using SRC. They have SRC in the specs, but that's now we just stop looking at that because the variation is too high because of the method. Now, if you can have a method which is able to tell you, okay, this flower is different from this one, but it is not because of the method, it is because of the flower, then you are in way better condition to have better control of your flower quality, which means also for the meters having better control of the flower they are sending to the bakers. So that's why reproducibility is maybe more important than repeatability, because that's where we are comparing result between that. So that's 2 to 3 times. That's what the SRC Chopin is bringing to users.
That's a significant reduction in that value. That's a significant improvement. Now, given the name of the instrument, the SRC Chopin 2, how does this second generation of the instrument improve on the first generation that was released?
Yeah. That's funny because I have this question sometimes. Say, okay, what happened to SRC 1? and then I say, what happened to iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? Because now we are at iPhone 11. So it's a kind of a joke, but what I want to say with that, it's the normal way of manufacturers like us to improve the quality. Always, it's not because you launch a product that you can say, okay, I launched a product that's perfect, it will be the same for the 60 years to come. It was maybe true some 60 years ago. It's not true anymore now. It's not true now. Why? Because first of all, customers are more and more demanding. Okay, so we need to have systems which are robust, And sometimes we have to admit we are learning. It's also a learning curve because you start with the machine, you have no idea of the intensity the people is going to use it, and sometimes they are very, very, very intense users. It's almost all day long, and when I say all day, it's even a part of the night. So it can be that when we have been designing the system, some choice might be improved. The other thing is that sometimes the improvement comes from outside. You know, technology is moving very fast now. So you can, at the moment you are designing a device, you can be using a certain kind of, I don't know, metallic part or whatever. And then there is a much better one coming in. What are you doing? You just forget it, or you try to improve with the new one. So that's definitely what we have been doing. So the SRC was launched about 6-7 years ago. And last year, we decided it was time to put together all the ideas we had of potential improvements. So it made a lot of changes internally. For the users, there is absolutely no change. There is a little bit of improvement in the software part, where we have more possibilities of adaptation. And that's the reason why we decided to put a tool on that, which is also for service purpose, because as the internal things may be a little bit different, it's easier for the people servicing the machine to know that they have a new version in front of them, so they can have the right parts. So yeah, I would say the contrary. If you have a device which is never changing, you should be worried, because maybe it's not up to date.
That's a really good point. I like the analogy with the iPhone.
Exactly.
So with the instrumentation, it's obviously easier than ever to run SRC tests with a fully automated method for the most part. So how can the millers and bakers look at the results and look at SRC results and then apply them to their operations to avoid issues on the production line?
Oh, that's that's a full topic on its own.
It is.
So yeah, I know we have limited time, so I'm not going to jump and describe everything. But of course, we do have, and that's a very interesting thing, that when we started working on the SRC, we already had a lot of literature available, because there were already a lot of work done on the manual method. The good thing is that if there is a publication on the manual method, it totally applies on the automated method. Only maybe the precision will be different, but the trends are always the same. So it was an interesting situation, but because as we were developing the tool, we already had applications from the tool, which is rare. When we started, I was not there, but when we started developing the alveograph, for instance, there was no bubble. When we started developing the mixer lab, we had no information about what's happening when we are hitting a dough, so we had to discover. In that case, we already had the result of the method, so it was interesting. So that's why I always remember discussions with Louise Slade, and every time she was telling me, "No, Arnaud, this method is conceived for soft wheat flour, for cookies and crackers. That's all." And I think she was right, because the main idea was to, or is still to, understand why biscuit problem happens. And when we speak about biscuit problem, we speak about ACE, we speak about size, we speak about cracks also, why a biscuit is cracking. And she explained it very, very clearly to me, and very simply, which is what I need. And she said, well, you know, when you are making a cookie, first of all, you need to make a dough. If you don't make a dough, you cannot make a cookie. So this I understand. But for making this dough, you need to blend different ingredients, but flour with water, to keep it simple. So it means that when you are doing a cookie, you are adding water, and during the baking, you are removing the water. And the way the water is removed, or better say, the way the water is kept by the biscuit, will totally change its behavior and its final shape. And that's all the idea of the SRC. When we are measuring glutenin, diamond starch, and fibers, to explain the fourth one, which is water absorption, we understand the competition between the three bad guys. And in fact, on the bad guys, I understood that there is one good guy, which is the glutenin. So you want the absorption to go to the glutenin, but maybe the weaker one, because the two other ones, they are keeping the water or taking the water out of the, it's a little bit like a child, but that's the way I like to explain it. Okay, the two other one, they are taking the water. And if it's like that, if you have too much diamond starch and too much pentosan, yeah, you are more likely to see problems during the production line. And that's why they also created an index, which is called GPI, for Glutenin Performance Index, which is making basically the ratio between the glutenin and fibers or pentosan and starch damage. So you want to have the maximum going to the glutenin and less to the two other ones. And on that, we have a lot of publications about influence on the size, diameter, whatever. So it's very clear. And that's, for me, that's the starting point. For me, in my mind, this is the main application from the SRC. When you know that, sorry, yes, when you know that, it's also when you have your profile in terms of GPI and you have your balance, it's something very easy to give to the miller. So the miller, they can adjust the wheat preparation, the diagram, select the streams that will totally fit with the amount of protein, diamond starch, and fibers. So it's a very good guideline.
As you pointed out, this is such a vast topic, and certainly any bakers out there with specific questions are free to reach out to KPM Analytics, to reach out to you with questions, because you've certainly done a lot on this topic. And they can also look at Bakerpedia as well. And as you've pointed out, SRC testing has almost exclusively been applied to soft wheat flour functionality and baking applications, but it is increasingly being used to evaluate hard wheat products as well. What are some of the more popular applications that you've seen for this test when it comes to hard wheats? Exactly.
And then that was part of the discussion I had with Louise at the time, and I was telling her, yeah, it's for cookie, but look, everybody is using it in very different directions. And it was interesting to see her reaction. The fact is that we are using, and we are seeing the SRC more and more used in all kind of bakings. There was been one of the publication is relating to European wheat, for instance. So they have been looking at European wheat and the impact on the bread quality. So where we can have impact on bread volume, for instance, depending on the SRC characteristics. Because basically what we are measuring is gluten, starch damage, and fibers, which are very, very functional components, not only in the baking, but in all products. So yes, we have seen that study from France. We have seen also another one from Europe, another one from India. Also a very interesting paper about Indian quality. And you should know that in India they are using a very specific flour, which is called atta flour, for making flat bread like chapati and things like that. And most of the time it's also very, very high in fibers. So this is totally changing the profile. We have had also very nice information about studying of flour streams from a miller perspective, and the same thing, it's for hard wheat. And they have been also looking at chlorination, at tempering effect, because that's the thing. If the SRC is used in the industry, then of course they will ask for SRC values at the miller side, and then the miller said, okay, that's great, but if I am out of spec, what can I do? And in fact, milling process and everything that they do have an impact on the SRC profile. But I mean, knowing the impact of the process on the SRC value also helps to fine tune it. And for me, it's also something very interesting because SRC relies on flower property. It's not something you can really change by putting additives or things like that, because it relies on the real functional polymers in the flower. So the only way you have to change it is to conduct your milling differently with different grease, different tempering, well, everything that millers know how to do. So it goes back to the core of flower quality. And then today you have, it's open. I have recently seen a paper on use of SRC on oats flour coming from China, I think. And another one from the same country, which was about rice. And it was studying the rice shelf life over time using the SRC, and they found very interesting data. So it looks like it is a method which is moving outside his creation area and is conquering a little bit the world of cereal. We are going to learn more in the next year also, because we are going to have more studies. It will go out from the soft wheat market and go to the hard wheat market. But I think that since, as I said, you are measuring with the SRC the core of the flower, the functionality of the flower, and the three main polymers which are constituting the flower, I think it makes sense, and particularly in the trend right now where we have more whole wheat flour, there's a lot of application and requests for applying solvent retention capacity to whole wheat. And the last trend we are seeing also is that people thinking about new solvents, not only using these ones, but using other solvents to better understand the flower functionality. And that's why we are very happy to have this tool in our range, and very happy to have the opportunity to speak about that with you today.
Yes, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to us today and answer our questions. And certainly, if anyone has questions, there is a wealth of knowledge at KPM Analytics on SRC and its various applications. There have been a lot of applications work done. So I would certainly encourage people to click on the link in the description and also visit the sponsor showcase to look up KPM Analytics and ask any questions that you may have. With that, that is essentially the end of our Thought Leadership Thursday. So one more time, just want to thank Arnaud for making the time for us. Thank you very much, Arnaud.
Thank you, Jane. Pleasure.
And if you have any questions, as I mentioned, go to that link, go to the sponsor showcase, and thank you all very much for tuning in today.